Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Jolene's Book and Writers Talk. This week, my guest is author Sara J Walker. She is a historical Christian romance fiction writer with four novellas, stories inside of the Romancing the Holidays and this latest anthology by the First Coast romance writers called Romancing the Tropics. Sara Walker is a graduate of the University of Georgia and currently lives in a small town in southern Georgia with her husband on the family farm. She loves to read many types of books, but most of what she writes are sweet Christian historical romances, many of them about distant relatives from tales passed down in her family. Currently, she is editing a three-book Christian historical series and hopes to put them up on Amazon in the near future. She loves to connect the stories in her novels with interesting and quirky characters who usually have to travel to find their happily ever after. Sara enjoys small town living, planting flowers, and taking long walks with her husband. She has two grown children and three grandchildren who don't visit as often as she would like. And this week, we are going to be talking about researching historical stories, sources, and other things of us writers talk about. And please remember to subscribe, like, share, and comment on all of our posts. And now let's get to it. What I thought we would talk about is historical research and writing, because
All right.
you have probably got a lot of interesting stories about that.
Yes, ma'am. I enjoy that. Uh, you want me just to tell you how it came about?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. As a young daughter, my mother took us to Tennessee every year to go visit her relatives. And on the way up, she talked to me about all the things that had happened in the family. And we've got a lot of good stories. Some of them are hard to believe, but we've got some good stories. So I was interested in the era in the 1920s because that's what she kept referring to. So then I used the computer and I did a lot of background. In my first book, I've got the Romney Gypsies, and I had to trace them to make sure they came through that era. And they did. They came from Pennsylvania down to Florida. And so I did all the research on that. And I did a lot of research around the Appalachian Mountains because that's where my part of my books are focused in on. I just had a good time researching. And to do the research, I went to most of these places. And it's just
Nice.
good to do.
So you use the local newspapers.
Yes, my husband is into genealogy, and I've learned to do all of that.
Do
Mhm.
you
Find out.
use the familysearch.org website?
No, I did not. Mm-mm. He
Well,
does that. He does that. That's his area. So I
oh,
stay out of that. Yeah. I don't
okay.
want to
Well,
compete with him.
I use the familysearch.org to do family trees
Oh,
and to
yes.
collect records about local residents, because I try to bring in residential true people into my
Yeah.
stories, into my fiction ones, and tell about events that actually happened in the early
That's what I
1900s.
do.
See,
That's what I do. I love it.
we want to bring history to life. Sometimes life is much stranger than fiction.
Oh, yes, it is. It is. When I was doing my first book, I had to do a lot of research in Savannah because they went to Savannah on their honeymoon.
Oh,
And it
nice.
was fortunate Al Jolson came and sang at the theater there at the same time my book was in. So we got to include Al Jolson. Just,
Cool, cool.
fun things like that. Mhm.
Well, I use a lot of the digital newspapers. I pay for a service, and they have newspapers from around the world. Um, and then, of course, the National Museum also has a digital collection of newspapers if you're interested,
Oh, I
that you can
am.
view.
I'm making notes on that while you talk.
Okay. Newspapers.com with the S is a subscription service. You pay $80 for 6 months, but you have
Uh-huh.
access to every newspaper article that they've ever uploaded.
Uh-huh.
Most of them are searchable. They
Uh-huh.
digitize them and then you can print them out or copy them to your desktop or whatever. And I just find it fascinating to read the headlines and the stories.
Yes. That's excellent.
And libraries, of course, local libraries are always a good source.
Yes. And the computer does a lot. You can find out an awfully lot going on the computer. That's where I got most of my stuff on the Romney people, was from the
Uh,
computer.
this latest book in the short story, um,
Yes.
how did that come about?
That one came about because I have an interest in missionaries.
Mhm.
And I also worked with a fellow, we worked with missionaries in different organizations. And it was based on a true story that I had heard about, where there was a lady that, they got pregnant and then he left without knowing he had a child. And we walked through that with her when she decided to go back to where he was. It was not an island, it was somewhere else, just to see if he realized that was his son. And so it was easy to do.
Oh, well,
Hmm.
good. And
I
it's
draw,
another adventure.
right. I draw a lot from the past. I love it because it's true. It can really happen that way.
What plans do you have for the future?
That's a good question. I've got 3 books right now that are just sitting here, and I'm going to edit them some more. I worked with a newspaper before, and there's all the difference in the world in writing news articles and writing books. And
Mhm.
so when I write them, it's sort of like a news article, and I have to go back and transfer them into looking like a book. So I've got these 3. I'm going to see what I can do with them. And if that goes through, I've got a lot more stories I can tell. I was
Wow.
telling Leah, we had I like to write about the older people
Mhm.
because not many people do that. And we had a little lady that was 81 that lived across the road from us. And we had a man that he lost his wife and he was 89 and they were both miserable. And one day out in the yard, I told her, I said, why don't you go meet him? So she goes to the drugstore where he's still working. And she says, Frank, I want you to come have dinner with me. And he panicked and walked away and didn't say anything. So she came to me and she said it didn't work. And I said, well, just give him time. And sure enough, he came 2 weeks later, knocked on her door and said, I would like to have dinner with you. And they ended up married and they had 3 good years together before them. She said the biggest problem was who's going to take care of the other one when they die because they were both older. I mean, just cute little things like that that happened to them. And his
Uh,
son said they were ridiculous when they dated. He said you would think they were teenagers. And I love that. Mhm.
well, you got to keep yourself young and involved.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, you planning on any future trips, or are you going to buckle down and get those books done?
Well, if anybody says go, I'm in the car, but I'm going to try to get these books done. I mean, at my age, if they say go, you got to go.
That's right. It's
Who
hard to
knows? You
get
might.
people to jump in the car and say, let's go somewhere.
I know it. I know it. Um, and it also opens up to see new stories. You get new ideas from trips, and I love that. How long have you been writing?
Um, Actually, I've been doing blog articles similar to newspapers for 10 years now. And,
Okay.
and I have a very eclectic of subjects that I
Huh?
like to write about. So I create websites, I write articles about them, I let them run for a couple of years. I get bored. I try something else. And right now I'm juggling about 10 different websites of
Oh
my
my.
own, just my
Oh,
own. And then I have like 5 for clients that I'm keeping updated
okay.
with. And
Oh, yeah, I admire you. I am not that computer wise. It was not, when I was growing up, we didn't have computers. I told everybody when I first went to work at Emory University, they had the first computer, the Word Star, and I had to learn computer and medical terminology at the same time. So one day the doctor came in and he said, Sarah, we got a problem. I said, what's that? He said, don't ever send a medical thing out without me reading it first. And I said, why? He said, you got the bile running out of this man's nose in the article, and everybody's calling you the Phyllis Diller of the secretary pool. So I learned early on to be careful with what I write.
Well, you obviously you've worked with WordStar. I've done WordStar. Are you using Word now?
Oh yes, I'm using Apple. Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, your daughter got you started on that, didn't she?
she did. She's been good for me. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if she were not pushing.
Okay, well, the newer version of Word will allow you to dictate and it will type what you say.
Oh my goodness. No, I did not know that.
It will also read what you wrote out loud.
That is great. And that's
Yeah,
the new version.
yeah. I pay for the new subscription service. It's like $12.50 a month, but it's a business one, and I
Uh-huh.
get all the bells and whistles with it. But uh, any new updates, it should already be on your computer. But they have a little search bar at top, and you put dictate or read aloud,
Uh-huh.
and those two little apps should show up. So before, after I do my last edit, I usually hit read aloud
Uh-huh.
and just listen to the story to see if what I hear is what I wrote. And it's a
That's
great
great.
way to
That
catch.
is great. I'm gonna have to do that. That sounds great. Because basically I'm a storyteller.
Sometimes it's easier for people to dictate and then
Uh-huh.
go in and fix it. It would, and hopefully we won't lose as many oldster.
That's true. Because there's
Because
not a whole lot of us around that'll tell a story.
I know, their photographs are being thrown away because the kids and the grandkids don't want them,
That's
don't know
right.
who these people are, unless they were marked with family names, they're not being kept and they're not being scanned in. And I think that is just horrendous. But
That is.
that's my opinion.
I like it. I am so glad I talked with you.
Well, good, good. And also, you can on YouTube. Uh, they're redigitizing a lot of the older movies, especially the
Ah,
ones from night. The earliest recorded movie was a couple of seconds in France. It was like 1888 or something, and
uh-huh.
they digitized that so you could see it. And then they took films of people walking the streets of Chicago, San Francisco, and New
Oh,
York,
yes.
and they've digitized those. And it's just fascinating to look to see
The
the
difference.
cars, the horses, the dresses, the people walking around, how they walked around and they had the hats on and the dresses and all that. This is from the 1900s that
Uh-huh.
they're doing it. And so if you ever want to see something like that, you can just go in and search on YouTube.
Just do a search and I can do it. Okay. Leah can help me with that.
Yes, ma'am. And it'd
Uh-huh.
be fascinating to watch because they've got one that's like 20 minutes long. And I says, well, that's just really cool.
I know you get to see the costumes. That's what I was thinking. Because it took me
Yeah.
a long time to do the dress and all for this period. Because it was such a time change. They went from the long black to the fancy Gibson girl type stuff.
Yes, there's a lot of changes happening between 1901 and 1921.
Absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
the the suffrage movement, the alcohol thing, the speakeasy.
Uh-huh.
We're getting into back. And apparently, my great grandfather or my grandfather, my dad's dad, ran booze between Florida, Daytona Beach, and Chicago. He had
Oh, wow. He
relatives.
really did run them. Yes.
Yes, yes. So that's very
Uh-huh.
that whole
That's
side of the family is
interesting.
very fascinating.
So it went all the way from Chicago to Florida.
Hmm.
I didn't realize they hadn't run that long.
He had relatives in Illinois in a little town next to Chicago, so that's how
Okay.
he got introduced. And they, but they had moved to Daytona Beach in 1927, I think, somewhere
Have,
around the mid 1920s. And when he turned 18 or whatever, he started
uh-huh.
doing gin or booze.
Started running them at 18.
Mhm.
Did he get caught?
No,
Have you done anything with this?
no.
You ought to.
Well,
That's a
I
good
know
story right there.
I've got a lot of research. Apparently, that side of the family uh, was very high society
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
in Chicago and Pennsylvania and whatever. And one of them was had an invention, steam invention, and bought submarines and went to South America during the oil
Wow.
run. And then one of his sons was murdered on Daytona Beach.
Uh-huh.
And uh, one of the relatives, he just had three different wives. One of them was,
You have a family.
I
Now,
do, I do.
I
And
know
this is
what we
just,
could jump into.
so anyway,
Oh,
now that all of them have passed, I got one more relative to go on that side, and she said, "Please wait until I pass before you post this stuff, because my children and grandchildren, they don't care.
they could care less. They
They
probably
could
won't believe it when you write
no,
it.
no, they'll probably think I made it all up anyway, but
Yes,
I
yes. But
I, I
that's
have it all down.
good deal. Well, I'm waiting to read that one.
Yes, yes, that's one of several that I have outstanding.
I know. It's amazing how you can just collect them.
Yes, I have the other side of the family who actually did family interviews
Oh,
with their parents and grandparents before they passed, and uh,
that's great.
they had them on cassette. I bugged the heck out of my cousins. I said, "When are you going to digitize them? When are you going to send it to me? Let's publish it or whatever." And he finally got that translated into a book, but he did a lousy job with the book. So he said, here's the book. You fix it, get some pictures, and
Uh,
republish it, and then the family will all buy it." And I said, "Okay." That's
okay.
what I'm in the process of doing, is getting different pictures to add into it. Because
Yeah.
if you say a name in a picture and you look at him and says, "Well, he does kind of look like a Frank or George or whatever," you can
Uh-huh.
imagine them doing the things a lot better if you have
You
a
read
name.
about. Mhm. That is great.
So, in your own writing, that's changed a lot over the last 50 years.
It really has. They don't really do newspaper. They do opinion. They do more editorials than newspaper. There's no way I could have worked the way some of these people work today.
Well, there are actually newer generations that are
Uh-huh.
going back to that, but they're
Oh,
on
great.
TikTok. Um, yes,
Okay.
yes, they're on TikTok and they're on YouTube Shorts, and they do who, what, where, when, not necessarily why, because you can't really report why a lot of the times. You can ask why, but if they could just get the who, what, where, and when of their
Uh-huh.
stories correct,
That's right.
and just tell it without opinion, you know.
That's right. That's what we used to do. You could make your own opinion. People had to think. The way they do it now, you don't have to think. You just accept what they say.
Mm. Or you end up
I'm
not
impressed
believing anything.
that you're on TikTok and all this good stuff. That's impressive. You
Oh
are
yes,
really
ma'am.
keeping up. Mm. You can tell you
Well,
love it.
they're moving on. There's other software out there. Um, I'm about ready to shoot people that create a new software because I'm tired.
I understand. I could loan you a gun.
Now, your daughter said that she started you a website. Yes.
Yes, she did.
Okay. And you have an email.
Yes.
Do
And a
you
website.
actually answer your email?
No, I don't. I've got to do that. I've got to start thinking like an author.
Well, actually, you got to start thinking like a business person. Sadly, authors have, even traditionally published authors nowadays, have to think like a business person if they want their stories to get out there. Even if you don't make a lot of money, but you want your stories to find the right
That's,
people,
uh-huh,
there's only a couple of ways to do that, and that's to either meet thousands and thousands of people and talk to them about your books, or start getting on social media, picking a platform that you like and just
uh-huh,
going for it. Part of these promotional efforts for the authors is I also put on your website and I put on your email address if you prefer, or one of your social media pages as a point of contact, so that if people resonate with your story, they have a way to get in contact and say, hey, I really like your story. What else do you have out there? Well,
uh-huh.
these anthologies that you're a part of, once the 6 months is over, you might consider publishing them in a book
Oh,
as short stories.
that's a good idea.
Well,
I like that idea
the
because they
first
seem to go up
three,
well.
right? The first three stories, you're in every one, right?
Yes, uh-huh.
Each those three stories can be put into a book of your very own.
Okay.
You've already got them edited. You just have to
Mm-hmm.
get a cover, get it formatted, and publish it. And that can be your first published full length book, even though it's
And,
short stories.
and then maybe people will look forward to another one.
Yes, it would continue to garner interest in your reading and or your writing.
Yeah, I have found that, the older people really enjoy what I've written. I
Mm-hmm.
passed around these three books in this community just to get the opinions to see if it was worth writing. And
Mm-hmm.
one lady said she stayed up all night one night reading my book. And I thought, well, that's a plus.
That is
So
very rare.
it really is. So I thought if I can appeal to the older market, that'll be great.
Well, see, if you can get your three books, your three stories in your own book, it would be something that you can have printed and take with you. Um, give one
When you
copy
go,
to the library, get a book club going, go to these events like the Jacks by Jacks Authors
mhm.
event, or the Sunshine State Book Festival is in January every year. That's in Gainesville. The
Yeah, some of the girls
Amelia,
have started doing that. That's what I'll need to do. Boy, you are full of good ideas. I appreciate this. I
well,
do.
part of what I do is help authors get going on the business
Uh-huh.
part. And so long as they're willing to meet me on Zoom to collect email addresses, because social media is a great way to get introduced and to garner interest. But your website and your email listing is where you control the narrative as an author.
Okay. Okay. I'm writing all this down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's some free tools out there that can get you started. All
Right.
you have to do is do the writing, try to be consistent. As a suggestion for each of these historical books, write down three things or five things, either research that you found fascinating that may or may not have made it into the book, but you wanted people to know about it while you were researching. And
Oh, okay. Do you write that like at the end of the story, like all your other writers do, where you
you
got
can
the
do that,
information?
and you can put that
Okay.
as a post and say, hey, I wrote this, did research for this book, and I come across this information. It didn't really fit the book, but I found it fascinating and thought you
That's
might
good.
enjoy it.
That would be me. I got started on it and couldn't go. It's like chasing a rabbit's trail. You can't help it once you get going in that direction.
Oh, I know it's terrible.
No.
I think
Okay,
I've
that's
spent 6 hours researching the dresses,
uh,
all the stuff that goes into the dress from 1900s. I mean, by the time you got all that stuff on, it's time to take a nap, let
That's
alone
right.
take it all off.
We see, I'm blessed in a way. My mother and my grandmother never threw away anything. I've actually got one of the dresses from the 1920s.
Whoa,
I know it.
cool.
I've got a lot of stuff. Everybody says I need to get rid of it. I've got too much, but it's coming in handy.
It comes around. That's what I
Yeah,
keep telling my kids. It will
yeah.
come back in style. Just hang on to it.
Just hang on to it. You're right. You're right. Yes. Okay. Research. And then what's another one? You said there were three things I needed to know.
When you're doing your posting, you can
Uh-huh.
post about your research. You can post about
Oh,
your writing difficulty.
okay.
What did you find difficult for that particular story? Um,
Hmm.
was it the characters weren't gelling in your head, or too many characters were jumping around in your head saying pick me," kind of thing? Because
That can happen.
it
I,
happens.
I had
So,
to kill one off, and Leah said I shouldn't do that, but I did.
and then the third thing is a lot of readers enjoy finding out a little bit about you, not where you live or who you're living with or anything like that, but if you have a hobby like rose. My grandfather was an avid rose grower. He
Oh,
created rose varieties, actually, and he got king of the show a couple of times, which was a big
I,
deal for the Rose Society, and shared lots of pictures.
I don't really like the way I look, but I'll do it for you.
Well, it's not necessarily you have to do your picture every single time, just every other time.
Okay, that's better.
Okay,
That's
because
good. And I can use some old pictures so I look better.
actually, I take my picture and I put it through an AI filter, and it makes me look very pretty.
Very good. Very good. I like that.
It
Okay.
it'll either cartoonify me, or put me in a moon glow, or make my hair purple if I want it. It's just, how do I feel this week?
You've got a variety of an audience. I love it.
But that
Well,
is
you
my
can,
suggestion for your newsletter and your social media posts, is if you can take little videos with your phone, not necessarily about going out to eat, but even though, because those just show up at midnight and make me hungry. But if
mhm,
you're going to a park, or you have a little dog or cat, or every now and then take a little
right.
and then upload that and say, just relaxing with my hobby or my friends.
Oh,
Or and the
I've
one
got
thing
lots
I
of
tell everybody, no kids. I know you see a lot of kids on TikTok and their parents are filming them or whatever, but you shouldn't have any children, especially if they're not yours. If they're
okay.
yours,
No,
you do what you want to. The backs of
no.
kids are fine, so long as we don't see their faces and people can recognize them, because it's just a safety issue.
Interesting. Okay.
As a historical fiction writer, what
Okay.
is your top number one advice you would give to somebody starting out?
Do a lot of research that makes the story and develop your characters because they had characters back in the old days. I mean, the little grannies, then you've got the dandy men, and you've got the slavery. I mean, there's so much in there, but you have to be very careful. Like with my gypsies, I didn't know you couldn't use the word gypsy. So I had to change it to Romney, but to me, they're still gypsies. But there's just a lot you've got to watch.
I have to be careful too when there's this whole debate about the in the public domain
Right.
books, because the way they wrote back then was one thing, but modern is another thing. So they're wanting you to take things out of the story
I
or
know.
change it. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
It's not, it's true storytelling because it's not the truth. Yeah. Yeah, like in one of my books, I've got the slaves that had been freed, but they still had been slaves, and I'm afraid that's going to cause some problems. But all you can do is publish and see. I
Right.
put them in the light; they're in good light. I mean, there's nothing bad or wrong, but it's just the fact that they were.
Well, I feel like our history is our
Mhm.
history. You
That's
have to
it,
study it so you don't repeat it.
right?
You got to learn from it.
Right.
Can't tell some people. They say just erase it like it was not there.
No, that's not true. That's like journalism. I just can't go with what they're doing.
Well, I appreciate you participating. What is the one thing that you find in your writing that your editor is always getting on to you about?
Well, I don't have an editor, but I've got a daughter that's a critic, and she gets on to me about, and it's using the same word over and over.
Which
The
word?
same phrase, yeah.
Oh,
And
the same phrase.
being a good Southern woman, we just say it all the time.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart. She just said it.
Well, if it's a Southern story, you got to say it every now and
That's
then.
what I said. Yeah. Yeah.
That I
Uh-huh.
use a lot of ing words as the first word in the sentence, and my editor says that's just lazy.
Uh,
You
yeah,
need to
they
reword
brought that
that.
out. I was doing that, but in one of the lecturers that came to our club said, do not use the ing words. And boy, it stumped me for a while. I had to rewrite everything because they're so easy and they're active when you do the ing. You
Right,
can
right. That's
see
what
it.
I was thinking. I was doing
Uh-huh.
the
We
show
were
don't
showing
say.
instead of telling. Uh-huh. But
Mm-hmm.
you can't do it. I mean, they're making it hard. But once you get published, I guess it's okay.
Well, they are grading us on a higher curve now.
Let me ask you one thing, writing historical, what kind of publishers, is there anybody you would recommend? I'm going to submit something to Wild Rose Publishers just to see.
Read through their website and they're not. They're more of a romance kind of thing, I would think. But if it's Florida based, it's the Pineapple Press. If
Oh,
it's Georgia based, it would have to be something connected to the Historical Society. Probably
okay,
call somebody at the University of Georgia and ask them uh,
okay,
who are they recommending for
okay.
historical fiction.
All right, I'm making notes on that one too.
And
Very good.
personally, I think you'd do better just publishing it
Self-published.
yourself. Yeah.
That's what several people have told me. Mm,
Yeah, Ingram Sparks is going to be your best bet because one, historical fictions, people like those in hardback covers.
mhm.
I mean, I don't know about you, but if I have a good story, especially a historical story that I'm going to be reading a lot over the years, I'd rather have it in hardback. And if you want it
Yes.
into in the libraries, you want to go with the Ingram Spark.